You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
The race for Congress in central Illinois is expected to be one of the hottest contested races nationwide. We know it certainly was in 2018. And in 2020, we have a rematch on our hands. Democrat Betsy Dirksen Londrigan running a second time, trying to unseat incumbent Republican Rodney Davis. This week, Congressman Davis, trailing in campaign cash, showed his strength in the agricultural community, showing off the endorsements of the Sangamon County Farm Bureau and bringing a big national Republican to his side. Congressman Tom Emmer from Minnesota showing off the support in the ag community. Meanwhile, Democrat Betsy Dirksen Londrigan locking arms with Illinois Democrats, lending her support to Governor Pritzker's biggest campaign pledge, the graduated income tax question that sits on the ballot this November. She's campaigning for that. She announced that support during a big Illinois Democratic event earlier this week.
Making sure that millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share of taxes is on the ballot. Restoring our democracy is on the ballot. So Democrats, we have a lot of work to do. I'm ready, and I know you are too.
You got a challenger that's supporting this governor, your governor's graduated income tax program that, quite frankly, they talk about how it's going to hurt, or it's going to hold the wealthy accountable. It's going to hurt your farming community.
And Democrat Betsy Dirksen Londrigan joins us now in person at the State House, still from this safe social distance. It's good to get you here in person. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here, Mark.
I want to get your response to what Congressman Emmer said a moment ago. You are in a close race, and the graduated income tax can be a polarizing issue for some. It might be an issue that candidates for Congress would just leave alone altogether to avoid upsetting voters on one side of the aisle or the other in a close, tight race like this. Why come out in support of the graduated income tax?
Well, I believe that if our teachers, our nurses, and our grocery store workers are paying their fair share in taxes, then millionaires and billionaires should too. And it's not surprising that, Congressman Emmer or Congressman Davis, are trying to distort the truth. The truth is that 97% of people in Illinois, including small businesses and farmers, are going to see zero change to their taxes. This affects the wealthiest people in Illinois. And, again, Congressman Davis was the face of the GOP tax bill. That was a huge giveaway to corporations and to special interests and to the biggest, richest 1% in our nation. I support helping working families and the middle class.
So that was your point. You wanted to be clear on that policy issue, but the opponents of the graduated income tax say that puts a lot of faith in the Democrats in Springfield here, who control both chambers, and in Speaker Madigan, that first rate, or that first set of rates, won't change in the future. Do you have that level of confidence that there won't be some extra tier that starts moving down toward the middle class and raising their taxes down the road?
No, look, Mark, what I know is that I want our working families to benefit from any tax bill, any tax benefit. And if our grocery store workers are going to work every day and they're paying their fair share, then millionaires and billionaires should too. And again, think about the context for that, Mark. This is coming from somebody who gave away billions of dollars to the wealthiest 1% in our nation and corporations. I mean, this is somebody who gave $40 billion in tax breaks to pharmaceutical companies and then, took $200,000 in corporate PAC money from them. So that's who he's in D.C. working for. I want to work for the people in central Illinois.
Very interesting. Your opponent's campaign, Congressman Davis, his campaign has said that your support for this graduated income tax policy, combined with a joint fundraising agreement with Speaker Madigan, puts you in league with the Speaker, essentially. I don't know if I've seen your response to this question that has been posed to many Illinois Democrats in recent days, especially considering that 7 House Democrats in the State House now say that Speaker Madigan should resign, given what we know about this federal investigation into him, into ComEd and this 9-year-long bribery scheme. I won't ask you about the Speaker's position in the House because you don't get a vote there. But you are a prominent Democrat running for a big seat. You'd be in Congress as an Illinois Democrat. Given what you've seen in those federal charging documents, given the detail you've seen in the subpoenas, the wiretaps, all the information that federal prosecutors have shared, do you think it's time for Speaker Madigan to resign as chairman of the Illinois Democratic Party?
Well, Mark, when you asked me about this a few weeks ago, my response is the same. No one is above the law. And, you know, any elected official who is found to have been involved in this scheme should step aside immediately. And, you know, meanwhile, we do have an admittedly guilty party, and that's ComEd, who, by the way, has given my opponent, Rodney Davis, $40,000 in corporate PAC donations.
Mm-hmm. You've highlighted the corporate PAC money several times. I know we've asked you about in your campaign about this. You have a campaign ad that came out after our recent report that says, quote, these are your words, corporate special interest can't buy me. I don't take their money. But you do take campaign cash from corporate lobbyists, including lobbyists for big pharma, for big tech companies. These are people who stake their entire livelihoods on their ability to win influence with people like you, should you be elected to Congress, to help the interest of their bosses, their corporations. How are corporate lobbyists not special interests?
Well, look, first of all, I am very proud to have taken the No Corporate PAC pledge. That is important to me. It is an important first step in cleaning up the corruption in politics, and it's an important step to people across Illinois 13. And as far as individuals who are donating to my campaign, Mark, I have over 50,000 individual donors. My average donation is $60, and every single one of those donations is about building our campaign, our effort to save healthcare from people like Rodney Davis, and that's my focus.
You've said refusing corporate PAC money is an important step toward fighting corruption, and saying that that's a corrupt act, that donation. I guess how is it different? It's a first step in trying to clean up this system. And of course, Congressman Davis doesn't want to clean up the system. He wants to protect the status quo because it's working for him. I mean, he's taken over $2.9 million from these corporate PACs. So yeah, that system works for him. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, I want that money out of politics. I'm taking the first step. I'm being proactive because I'm running a grassroots campaign here. I want to go to Washington to represent my neighbors in Illinois 13, and I want them to know, and I want them to rest assured that they are who I'm going to be fighting for, not corporations and not special interests. I think ultimately, you know, once the political season dies down, most people watching will look at the way people vote, the way they use the power that the people give them, as the ultimate judge of who they are or how corrupt any candidate might be.
I agree, and and I look forward to being held accountable for my votes because I'm going to be answering directly to the people in Illinois 13.
And I understand that distinction, but I still for example, some of your campaign commercials are being funded in part by corporate PAC money. When the DCCC goes into a joint ad buy with you at the campaign rate, that's corporate PAC money that's putting your message out there. Why not be more upfront about that? Or if that's a corrupting influence, why not separate yourself from that?
No, look, Democrats working to elect Democrats is not news, Mark. Of course, Democrats are going to work to elect Democrats. We have really important things to do. We have health care to protect. We have prescription drug costs to lower. We have voting rights to protect. We have really big things to do. So of course they want to elect more Democrats.
Mm-hmm. But I guess you're the candidate making the claim that the corporate PAC money is a corrupting influence. I think a lot of Americans might agree with you. I just wondered how do you protect or insulate yourself from that corrupting influence if that corrupting influence is helping to put your message out?
Because I'm taking a first step for my campaign. I think this is a step in the right direction. I'm excited to take it, and I will proudly tell anybody that I am not taking corporate PAC money, not now, not when I'm in Congress. That is not going to change. I am going to Washington, D.C. to represent my neighbors in Illinois 13.
Mm-hmm. You jogged my memory there. You're right. We were having a conversation, and I think I did ask that question. Thank you for that. So you focus primarily on healthcare in your campaign, both this time and last time around. That's certainly something that many Americans care about. But this is a special year, given that there is this coronavirus and record unemployment, the precipitous drop-off in employed Americans there this year. How do you distinguish yourself from Congressman Davis on those issues of jobs and the coronavirus?
Well, look, right now I can tell you because I talk to people, I'm on the phone every day, all day, and people across central Illinois are scared. We are at this economic cliff. People are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their rent. Small businesses are trying to figure out how they're going to stay open and if they're going to make it. And what they need right now is serious leadership who is going to extend unemployment benefits, who is going to refill the coffers of the PPP loans, to make sure that people can stay afloat during this unprecedented time. And frankly, Mark, there is no bigger spotlight for the need for quality, accessible health care than what we have seen with this pandemic. And people are scared that if somebody like Rodney Davis gets in, who has voted 11 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act with no replacement, that they could get kicked off their health insurance, or any number of the 282,000 people in Central Illinois and Illinois 13 who have pre-existing conditions could either lose their coverage or be discriminated against price-wise and get tossed off it and not be able to afford it. Those are very real concerns that people have. Additionally, lowering the cost of prescription drugs is a huge concern that I hear from people every day. So while they are making these, horrible choices about which bills are going to get paid, they have to factor in their prescription drug costs. And here we have a congressman who has taken over $200,000 from pharmaceutical corporate PACs and then voted their way on important bills. He voted against lowering the cost of prescription drugs. And that is in direct conflict with the expressed needs of people across Central Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the 13th district, there are a lot of college campuses in this district. You performed well on college campuses in 2018. A close race, it came down to just a few thousand votes. But this is the year of COVID, and we know that fall enrollment on campus has taken a drastic hit. How does the coronavirus, especially on college campuses, impact your chances?
Well, we've been communicating with people across, the 13th district, obviously. I think last month alone, my volunteers and interns made over 50,000 calls with voters, or had over 50,000 calls with voters. It's a lot of calls. So we're going to continue doing that. And as far as the campuses go, it's just going to look a little bit different. We're still doing everything that we need to do. We are in full-on voter registration mode on all the campuses, and it's going great. These kids are fired up. They are ready for November 3rd, I can tell you that.
Yeah, and is there a hope that is there still outreach? We know some college students, for example, who may have voted here in 2018, perhaps for you, should get an application to vote by mail. Is there some hope? Is there any outreach to them, hoping that they will still cast their vote here in the 13th?
Well, the students are back on campus.
Many of them are.
Across
Some of them
the district. A lot. The students are back on campus across the district. And so we're focusing our efforts on the students who are back on campus, and there's a lot of them on campus. And so that's where our efforts are, is to make sure that those students who are there, that they register to vote, and if they are already registered, then that they update their address there, in Champaign or in Edwardsville, wherever, they're going to school.
Mm-hmm. We heard from Christina Zahorik, the chair of the Illinois Democratic County Chairs Association this week, say to Democrats who might be excited about the prospect of a Joe Biden presidency, don't count your chickens before they hatch. I'm paraphrasing her sentiment, but essentially she was saying we've seen national polls in the past, in 2016, it didn't quite turn out that way. Give us a preview of what Congresswoman Betsy Dirksen Londrigan would look like in a second term should President Trump win re-election. What would that sound like? This congressman in this district has taken an oftentimes friendly tone, if a muted tone, with the president. And I wonder what that would look like if there was a different member of Congress in the 13th. What would we expect to hear from you?
Well, first of all, you can expect me to always put the people in Illinois 13 first. And no matter who the president is, that I am there to fight for their health care, for access to quality, affordable care. For lowering the cost of prescription drugs, for protecting people with pre-existing conditions. There's your first difference. We've got a congressman now who votes against lowering the cost of prescription drugs and against protecting people with pre-existing conditions and is trying to break our healthcare system. I want to build it up, and I'll work with anybody to do that. You can also expect that with any administration, that when I see somebody who is, whether it is tweeting, whether it is, to the national media, doing things like calling on people to commit illegal acts like voting twice, that I will be there to stand up for our nation and say that that's unacceptable. And we don't have that either right now, because Congressman Davis refuses to stand up to this administration.
The president has also made law and order and public safety a big part of his personal reelection campaign. We're hearing a lot of that same rhetoric from many Republicans, including Congressman Davis, who echoed some of the same language at an event earlier this week in Springfield on Thursday, when he said that much of the violence and the looting and the protesting that has broken out in major American cities, they're pointing the finger of blame toward Democrats who hold elected office in many of these big cities, and said that Democrats have taken a position that's too soft on crime. Where do you come down on this issue of the push for criminal justice reform, but also in this moment where we have seen this lawlessness start to expand? How do you address that?
All right, well, you said a lot of things there, Mark, so let me unpack that a little bit. Right. So first of all, I condemn the violence. There is no place for it in our society. Extremists on both sides they should not be doing what they're doing. I condemn it in the strongest possible terms. But please do not confuse the looting and the violence and the vandalizing, which are horrible. Please do not confuse those with peaceful protests taking place, where people are coming together peacefully to voice their concerns about the systemic injustices that our Black and brown communities are facing. So let's make sure that we're not confusing those issues. I know that the president and maybe Congressman Davis think that that's politically expedient. I think that's wrong, because the message here should be that violence is to be condemned absolutely. Peaceful protesting is our right, and it is indicative of the unrest, the social injustices that we are seeing. And that systemic racism, Mark, is about more than criminal justice reform. That is a piece of it, but the tentacles of systemic racism are so deep that in order to address it, we have to look at the inequities across the board, whether it's healthcare, education, our economy, housing. It is pervasive, and it's going to take a real commitment from elected leaders to start rooting that out.
In policing specifically, because I know you're mentioning a lot of different issues there, but in the issue of police reform, should there be a national ban on the use of chokeholds, for example, or what other issues would you like to see? What changes would you like to see in law enforcement?
Well, in terms of law enforcement, I think that we have to, I'm against defunding the police. I do believe that we have to ban chokeholds. And I do believe that we have to do more training in de-escalation methods. But I also think that it would be a huge value add to our law enforcement teams to have mental health professionals, to have addiction professionals added to their teams, because not every intervention needs to be a law enforcement intervention.
Would you vote to end qualified immunity?
I think that there was something about reforming qualified immunity, which I would support, but again, reforming it. But this is bigger than law enforcement. This is about so much more, Mark, and you shouldn't reduce it down to just one issue. It is about the inequities in healthcare. We are seeing right now during this pandemic, our Black and brown communities suffering and dying at much higher rates than other people. Why is that? That needs to be looked at. That needs to be addressed. We have these same types of inequities in our healthcare system and in our housing systems. So that is a piece of the problem, but these protests are about, that problem and so much more.
Will it be a failure of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi if there can't be a deal struck, another stimulus bill before the election?
I think the failure of of how we're dealing with this pandemic lies squarely on this administration, who has not followed the science, who has not listened to the scientists and the advisors, who has flouted the recommendations. I think the position that we are in is not only because of this administration and the leadership of President Trump, but it's because of the enablers like Congressman Davis who refuse to stand up for what I have to believe they know is right. Instead, just checking that, that compass at the door and checking what they know is right at the door for political expediency. I mean, we have people who are suffering across Illinois 13, people who have died from COVID, small businesses who are suffering, families who are facing eviction, families who can't pay their electric bills. And I don't think it had to be this bad. National leadership would have been wonderful. We have not had it. And I think that this administration is answering for that now. So the failure lies there, and with people like Congressman Davis who won't stand up for us.
And certainly Congress could still take action and find some sort of a compromise. I guess the nature or the context of the question was more about the strategy or the approach. We saw Speaker Pelosi pass the $4 trillion HEROES Act, trying to get that out the door when Republicans only wanted to see one. In holding out for the $4 trillion, to date, she got zero. And I wonder if you would have liked to have seen a more moderated or compromise approach when she was passing that bill to try to reach some sort of agreement on that.
Well, sure. I mean, the approach that I want to see is I want that $600 a week going back to individuals who need it. I want that unemployment insurance extended. I want those PP loan coffers refilled for small business owners. That's what I want to see, and Congress should certainly do that. But I think you're neglecting to mention that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, he put everybody on recess. So here we are at the economic cliff, and he tells all the senators to go home. I think that's the height of irresponsibility.
And certainly that is part of the record as well, Senator Leader McConnell. But you're running for the House, and you'd be working in the Democratic caucus there, so I was asking you about that approach. But certainly,
but they passed something, and the Senate should have taken it up.
Yeah, very interesting. Of course, we will see where this goes. There's only about 2 months or so left until Election Day, and the issues pertaining to the coronavirus will almost certainly, barring a miracle, be lingering in the next Congress once they take the oath of office after this upcoming election. A wide-ranging discussion. We always appreciate hearing from you on many of these topics, and I'm sure we will continue to tune in as our audience watches this race closely leading up to the Election Day. Betsy Dirksen Londrigan joining us live, or here with us in the State House from a safe socially
distance, live.
Yeah. Even cleaned off the microphone and everything. She was wearing a mask when she walked in. We're keeping our precautions. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. All right, we're back in just a moment.